Bona tarda, benvinguts i benvingudes al segon dia d'aquestes dècimes jornades d'Arxivers Sense
Welcome
Fronteres.
to
El
the
valor dels arxius
second
en la comunitat
day
continua.
of
Com ja
the
sabeu, el programa
Archivers
continua en mode online
session,
a través de Zoom.
10th
Amb
edition. We
l'aplicació
are
Arxius a
going
la
to
web podeu fer
continue
preguntes de tot
this
l'arxiu o demanar
session in
paraules en
this
castellà per
virtual
qüestions habilitants. Recordeu que
edition.
poden seguir-nos també
You
en els canals
can
a les principals xarxes
make
socials amb
remarks
l'etiqueta
on
AsF's
this
i
seminar
i recordeu també que tindreu disponible
in
el
the main
programa en àudio
social
i en
media,
totes les
and
playlists
then
en
the
els vostres
videos of
dispositius
all
a l'Instagram o
the
a YouTube.
speakers will be included in our
Començaremos con un
YouTube
conservatorio
channel. We are going to start with a
bajo el lema Activismo y
conversation,
Life en América Latina
activism
que
in
moderará María Elena
Archbisdom
Porras,
in Latin America,
historiadora y
moderated by
archivera,
Maria
máster en Historia
Elena
Andina y licenciada en
Porras,
Ciencias de la Educación. Fue
President
directora del Archivo
of
Histórico y
Archivers,
coordinadora de la Jefatura de Archivos
Archivist
del Ministerio de Relaciones
Without
Exteriores de
Borders in
Ecuador.
Ecuador, and
Actualmente es docente de
Vice
la Maestría en
President
Archivística y Sistemas
of
de Producción Documental de la Universidad Andina Simón Bolívar,
Archivists Without Borders
presidenta de Archiveros Sin
International.
Fronteras Ecuador y vicepresidenta de Archiveros Sin Fronteras Internacional.
Whenever you want, you have the floor.
Buenos días. Me voy a permitir
Well,
compartir la
good
pantalla.
morning. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you very much, Adrián. Do you see my screen?
Bueno, buenas tardes, buenos días a todos
Well,
los que hoy
good
se encuentran
afternoon or good
conectados en este
morning.
segundo día de Jornadas de Archiveros Sin
The
Fronteras,
second day
en el
of
que
the
celebramos los
10th
25 años de su
edition
presencia en
of
los tres
the
continentes.
Archivists Without
Gracias a
Borders.
nuestra colega
Thank
Nuria
you
Carreras
to
y a todos
Nuria
los
Carreras
organizadores de
and
este
the
evento, a
organizers of
quienes
this
han
event.
invitado para escuchar también las
We
voces de
are going to
Latinoamérica y su activismo archivístico,
share
como lo
our
receptivo
voices
del
from
nuevo
Latin America.
conversatorio. Nos unimos también con un abrazo
So
fraternal y
we
virtual para los
want
colegas
to
Ramón
hug
Alberto y
our
Aida Luis
colleagues
Mendoza
Ramon
en el
Alberti
justo
and Aida
homenaje
Luis
que les
Mendoza
rindieron
in
ayer.
the homage
Y
that
Ramón
was
explica
paid
que
to
todos
them
agradecemos a
yesterday.
Ramón por el
Thank you,
inmenso
Ramon,
esfuerzo
for
desplegado en
the
cada uno de nuestros
efforts in
países
each one
para
of
lograr
our
la constitución de
countries
cada
for
región.
the
Para
different
ti, Aida, por tu
departments of
reconocimiento por
archivists
toda tu
without
asesoría
borders.
jurídica
Thank
y
you, Aida,
acompañamiento
for
que nos has
your
dado durante el
support
tiempo que
in the
participaste
last
como ex
years
secretario
while
del
you
Consejo Internacional de
participated in the
Coordinación de Estudios
international
Internacionales
board
de la
of
Luz Española.
Archivists
Un
Without
saludo
Borders.
también para la
Also,
presidenta
my
Cristín
greetings to the
Martín y
President,
para todos los
Christine
colegas de
Martin, and
Latam.
all our colleagues in Africa.
Tan diversa como es nuestra región
Our
latinoamericana,
region,
son
Latin
diversas las
American region, are
problemáticas que
very
Archiveros Sin
diverse.
Fronteras
So
ha
the
debido afrontar
problems
durante
that
estos
we
últimos
had
años.
to face in the
No
last
son
years are
precisamente
also
aquellos motivados por
different.
las guerras y su impacto en
The
el
wars,
continente
the
centroamericano
impact in the
o su
cultural
cercano Europa o el
heritage,
África,
as we can
sino
see in
más bien
Europe and
aquellas
Africa,
dificultades
and
derivadas de
also
la
other
falta de política
difficulties
pública
because there
respecto a
is
los
a
archivos de
lack of
nuestros
public
países,
policies in the
que han
archives
impedido
in
en
our
algunos casos
countries.
aprobar una
And in some
regulación de los
cases, we
archivos
have not
acorde con lo que
approved
venía del
a
proceso constituyente,
regulatory
así como
framework.
por los efectos
And
causados a los
also
archivos en
the
la institución
impact
y en la memoria
on the
colectiva,
archives and the
por
collective
causas
memory of the
políticas,
people's
como ha sido
political
la fuga
reasons,
del
like, for
fascismo del siglo
example, the
XX,
repressive
el
regimes
conflicto
of
armado
the
y el
20th
periodo de
century, the
violencia
armed
alternativo en
conflict and the
Colombia,
violence
décadas
period of
de una
Colombia,
inestabilidad política que
with
ha
the
sacudido a los
political
países andinos,
instability
como el
and
Ecuador, en
turmoil
Colombia y en los
in
distintos países.
Ecuador, in Peru, and in
Riesgos
Bolivia,
obviamente para los archivos,
with some
como fue
risks
por
for our
ejemplo la
archives.
toma de la
For
cinemática por la
example,
policía
the
colombiana en los movimientos sociales de la
Ecuadorian
represión, como le
police
mencionó ayer
taking
nuestra
the
presidenta Cristín Martín.
theaters and
Ello ha determinado que los archivos como entidades
the
responsables de la
archives
custodia de los documentos
responsible
históricos y
of
contemporáneos,
being
así
custodian
como
of
la
the
comunidad
documents
archivística de cada uno de
and
nuestros
the
países,
archivist
tenemos que
community in
ofrecer
our
gratuidad
countries, we
sostenible y
have
amplia
to
patrimonio
be
documental
committed
nacional.
to the
Por
national
ello, el
heritage.
activismo
This
archivístico de
is
las
why
ASFs ha
activism
sido
in
siempre
our
como una
departments
herramienta
is a
emblemática de
tool.
interlocución
It is
y
a
diálogo con
strategy to
diferentes
establish a
entidades,
dialogue
ya sean
with all the other
gubernamentales,
institutions,
comunitarias y
public,
gobiernos locales,
private.
para emprender una
And
gran
in
cruzada
order to
en defensa de los
start
soportes
this
repositorios que
battle
guardan
to
evidencias de
defend
identidad local y
these
nacional y
repositories
que
that
promueven
keep the
servicios para la
evidences
búsqueda de
and
la verdad,
testimonials
justicia y
to look for the
reparación de las
truth
víctimas
and
archivadas por los
reparation
archivos.
of victims.
Igual compromiso hemos
And
asumido para intentar
also
volcar los
commitment in
dispositivos legales
order
que
to
permitan un mejor funcionamiento de los sistemas
have
de
a better
archivos a través del
functioning of our
conocimiento,
systems or
que tanta
memory
falta nos hace.
laws. They are so
Debemos trabajar
necessary.
por la
And
profesionalización de la
also to
archivística en la
work on
región.
the
Es menester trabajar por
professionalism
el acceso
of
a la
our
información
region
y la
and
lucha contra
access
la
to
corrupción y la
information
impunidad,
and
dos
fighting
áreas a las
against
que nos enfrentamos los
corruption.
latinoamericanos. Iniciamos
And we start this conversation, and I don't have a lot of time, and we only have a representation of the 9 departments of the region, and we are going to talk about 4 specific topics. We are going to start with the legislation of archives. We are going to share the experiences of Paraguay, Ecuador, and Mexico. We can open a Q&A session in the end. I'm going to give the floor to Lidia Galeano from Paraguay, and she's going to share the experience of ASF Paraguay in the draft of the National Law of Archives, the work they do in Paraguay, and the main difficulties for the approval of this law. Alicia, you have the floor. Access to the meeting. Oh, thank you very much, Maria Elena. The audio is not very good. We are going to do our best. So, talking about the regulation framework, we have a law back in 1997 that establishes that we need to deposit the official documents in the General Archive of the nation. And after 10 years, the public institutions will have to give away these documents to the General Archive of the nation. But in this same article, we have 2 problems. So first of all, we need to give documents, and then to create the National Archive of the nation. So we don't have this in our country. And it is true that we have our National Archive, but it does not substitute the local one, because it doesn't have infrastructure, it doesn't have enough resources. And it has different documents between 1,500 and 1,800. And from then on, we don't have a registry of the documents giving support to this public administrations. And also, there's this lack of regulation, and we don't have university studies. We have in the National University a specialization in document management and archives management. So after the fall, the collapse of the dictatorship, there was a process that started for the victims. And we created in 2006 the Justice Commission to investigate the violations that took place during the dictatorship. And so, after the work of this commission that delivered a report to the 3 powers of the state back in 2008, in this final report, they established some recommendations to Paraguay. And about the historic memory and the archives linked to this memory. The biggest challenge is the safeguarding of all the documents that were compiled from different sources, also the testimonials of the victims. And in this context, we have prepared a draft. Here you can see the presentation of the project. And we have delivered to the National Congress a project to create a national archive in 2017. And we started working on that in 2015. And with the different associations and so on and so forth. And there is also a technical table in order to work on the update and modification of this project. And also the approval of this law last year, then the executive power, and also with the new elections that took place, and the government vetoed the law. saying that there was a lack of budget, so we don't have a regulation. We still don't have this regulation, this lack of regulation about archives. Well, we see the lack of the head, the lack of budget, and the lack of staff with enough skills and well remunerated. And also the archive is a deposit where we keep papers, and this is what is taught in our country, and also the lack of archivist discipline. And then in 2014, the law to have access to public information in Paraguay was banned, was fined, and the citizens couldn't have access to information. So the public institutions have to disseminate the information in transparency. And these initiatives of transparency and access to document depend on the quality, accessibility, and reliability of these public archives. And this way, if the documents are not well organized, it will be very difficult to verify the information that they contain and also to abide by the terms of this law. So difficulties that we see, and the lack of knowledge of the benefits to have this national system of archives, and the changes in politics in our country, change of the government, and a lack of participation of the civil society. It is just the summary, Maria Elena, of what we've been doing in the past. Thank you, Alicia. Before I give the floor to Ramon, I just wanted to share briefly the Ecuadorian case, because we also worked during the pandemic in a commission, and apart from the different guilds of historians and archivists, so we have the different governments and even the presidency and the academia with the university archives to propose a new law, and working also in raising awareness about this proposal with the participation of international colleagues, with Ramon, Aida, and Luz, organized by the Andine University. The proposal was given to the presidency, but unfortunately, as Alicia said, there was a change in the government, and also the dissolution of the National Assembly, so it was impossible to be approved to pass the bill. And here you can see the evidences of how this commission was formed, also the agreement that was signed, to participate in this draft, but we didn't, but it was not approved. So now we are going to continue with Ramon Aguilera, and he's going to explain the role of Mexico in the design of the different laws and the law of history and truth. Ramon, you have the floor. Thank you very much. And congratulations for this 25th anniversary of Archivists Without Borders. In the case of Mexico, I would like to underline that we have this general law of archives embedded in a very broad framework, which is a reform of 2014 of transparency that established the obligation to elaborate 3 general laws: the transparency law, the personal data protection law, and then the general archives law. These 3 laws are intertwined, and this allows us to have a holistic platform in information and documentation. And ASF Mexico participated back in 2018 in the group for the writing of the General Law of Archives, together with other organizations of the civil society. We could give it an approach of human rights because there were 8 specific articles about archives and human rights. In this law that was approved, it was passed in 2019, we established the obligation to guarantee the preservation of the documents related to the violation of the human rights, determining its preservation, and it's going to be a crime if these documents are destroyed. And also the obligation to organize and give access to all the different files related to the violations of human rights. So these type of documents that are in the governmental archives are of public interest, and they cannot be booked. They are historical documents. And the archivist planning, which is an obligation for all governments of the country, they must do this planning, these programs, with a perspective on human rights. And our general law of archives achieved a very interesting point. And also, this year, we have a new law that wants to be a general law for the country related to the memory and truth. It is an exercise that is done in an open parliament with different organizations from the governmental and parliamental field, so members of parliament and members of Senate, and it is also included in the technical committee where we focus and we give our opinions in everything related to archives and human rights, taking care that this is linked to the general law of archives and also the preservation of all the files. So this general law of memory is still undergoing because we are in the last stage of the government, and then the discussions have stopped because there will be elections. The political issues are more important than other issues, so we expect that this law is going to be passed in the near future. Thank you very much.
We're going to listen to Marta Lucía Giraldo in order to know the main results of the work started in Colombia with the academia, the victims associations, and the rural communities in order to restore archives related to violations of human rights during the armed conflict. Marta Lucía, you have the floor. While we wait for Marta Lucía to solve her problems, maybe you could continue talking about the role of archives in the Commissions of Truth instituted in Mexico, created in Mexico. Sure, no problem. Regarding this topic, there were 2 commissions of truth connected to the Dirty War from 1965-1990. These commissions were created in various administrations, one in 2002 and another one in 2020. In both cases, archives had a fundamental role in the investigations on the implication of or the involvement of the state regarding violations of human rights, especially during the students' movement of 1968, where we have tried to document the atrocities performed by the army against the students and activists of the time under the mandate and orders of specific politicians, the President of the Republic and minor civil servants. The first commission was terminated in 2006 without achieving its goals. The second commission, created in 2021 under the ruling of the Mexican left wing parties, there was some progress, but truth was not reached and no reparation of the damage was achieved. So it's sad to say that access to the full archives recorded is a pending issue due to the lack of transparency supported by the presidency of the Republic with a double standard, where there's a requirement to deliver the National Archive as indicated in a decree, all the files of the army and the national security agencies related to violations of human rights. And in particular, the movement of 1968 and on the massacre of the 43 normalist students. It was a very famous case called the Ayotzinapa case. These archives continue to be a claim for liberation against this lack of transparency of the politicians. We haven't been able to open these archives. They have not been transferred as indicated in the decree, all the full files, and during this last commission, some missing files were detected in relation to violations of human rights. So this is a pending issue in our country where we continue to struggle for opening the archives and the preservation of all this information in order to be able to repair the damages caused. Marta Lucia is here with us now. Marta, thank you. Maria Elena. Where to add to the congratulations of a 25th anniversary of ASF and their solidarity. Also, I would like to say hello to my Latin American colleagues and everybody connected online. Our proposal from Colombia, this application of transitional justice mechanisms involves the transparency of archives, which is fundamental for the defense of human rights. This recognition includes personal files, such as the one of Pablo Balalinde, someone who was tortured and murdered by the Army of Colombia in 1984. That archive around the search for truth, justice, and memory has been the object of our reflections, and we have focused on community archives for recognition, such as the Madre de la Candelaria community that support the victims of the conflict, documenting cases of abduction. And recently, we have tried to give visibility of the archive of the Commission of Truth that finished their mandate last year. And we have started a number of dialogues around the archives. We have summoned organizations of the civil society and the academia around the need to create a policy to grant access to the archive. Regarding reparation of victims, we have more than 9 million people listed as victims. Our efforts are targeted at giving visibility to this plurality of archives and the effort of the bookkeepers and record keepers through conversations, dialogues, conferences, exhibitions in museums such as the Archivo Vivo exhibition based on the archives of the Mothers of the Candelaria. From the academia, we have tried to develop archival practices that promote among our students solidarity to support documentation processes such as the ones I just mentioned, and to support the preservation, especially everything regarding digitalization of these collections. Thank you so much. Marta Lucia, in relation to this commitment in Colombia and Mexico, and because these are matters of human rights, we're going to give the floor to Liliana Gayulo for her to tell us the main advances in Uruguay regarding the documentary description of the archives of human rights in the Atom platform. Liliana, you have the floor.
Liliana, ¿me escuchan ahora? Sí, ahora te escuchamos, Liliana. Dale. Ven.
Go ahead, Liliana.
Ya.
I'm having connection problems. I'll try to be concrete. I would like to say hello to all my colleagues and congratulate ASF for 25 years of existence. Uruguay has advanced a lot in the classification and organization of documents around human rights. I'm going to talk about the substantial advances made in description of archives with Atom. This is a multilingual software. It's open source. We cannot receive your audio stream properly. It is a bit bumpy.
Liliana, perdón, no se te escucha, está entrecortado.
Sorry, Liliana, it's a bit bumpy. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. Sorry, Liliana.
Liliana, se escucha muy mal.
We cannot hear you, Liliana.
Sí, creo que
it's a bit choppy.
Que está en algún sitio que no creo
Maybe
que tiene
she doesn't have a good connection.
Bueno, vamos a intentar que Liliana se conecte tal vez al final.
Maybe we'll try it later.
Liliana, si nos
Let's see if she can solve her connection problems and continue with her presentation. Let's move on then. And
¿Me están escuchando? ¿Sí?
Are you listening to me? Can you hear me?
Ya.
The experiences of Ecuador and Bolivia, how to save the memory of indigenous peoples, defenders of nature. The archives of the communities have been affected by social and political conflicts of the recent decades, and they are excluded from the concerns of the local governments. Ecuador has been working in archival interventions for the restoration of the indigenous memories in the central and northern mountain regions. In ASF Ecuador, did a project for the restoration of the Cayambe people through an intervention in the local municipal archives. 90% of the rural population are defined as indigenous, the Cayambe people. This is one of the Quechuan people in the Andean region. Cayambe has a big concentration of estates and they fought against the property of land, fighting for education, and there were two women leaders, Teresca Cuango Tránsito Amaguaya. The proposal of ASF Ecuador is to restore the memory of this town, organizing a school workshop, something similar to what ASF France did in Burkina Faso, using a terminology based on Minga, which is a Quechuan tradition based on collective work for social purposes that is centuries old. We're combining professional techniques when dealing and managing archives and records with ancestral techniques of the local population to achieve local objectives, such as the management of the archives and records to guarantee their dissemination, to give value to the documents of the 19th century, to start a model that can be replicated in other villages, and carry out a video to promote the visibility of this process of restoration. Regarding the northern region, in the region of Riobamba, they have an important archive for the history of these people. There were a number of revolutions in the 18th century, and in the House of Culture, many records that date back to the 16th century are recorded. They don't have any description tools, and there's only one people in charge with no archival training. He's a poet. ASF Ecuador has decided to carry out all the archival techniques of all the collection in order to recover all the documents and make it accessible to the public. This repository can prevent the loss of documents that have happened in the past, grant access to information, saving time and money, because this one single person have a lot of work, as you can imagine. At present, these projects have been reactivated and are waiting for international collaboration through a convention with the Ecuadorian Conservarte Association. In the case of Bolivia, and René Santos on the name wanted to share their experience. After the call by Vika in 2021 regarding archives and climate change, ASF Bolivia started an intervention in libraries and archives and the National Arboretum of Bolivia, recovering the work of Alessandro Bocol, Alcindo Benit, Tadeo Hanke, and Bolivian Martin Cárdenas, José María Bosso, and Nicolás Armentia, botanists, all of them, were warned about the risks of pollution on nature and the impact on the rural populations of Bolivia. This implied also the study of the native flora, and the descriptions are recorded in this repository. ASF Bolivia published the advances of these investigations in their digital newsletters between June and December 2021. It appears that Alicia has some problems with the connection, and in this slide that Liliana has prepared, there's a summary of the advances or progress they have undergone. I think they had 2 archives. It's a pity Liliana cannot explain them to us, but you have all the details gathered by Liliana. She is saying that she cannot connect. She has problems with her microphone, as you can see. Atom access to memory is created for historical archives, and in this case, these are archives from the 19th and 20th century, and this is the Uruguayan experience. They are working with a specific thesaurus for human rights. So thank you for your attention. Sorry for the technical problems, but it was difficult having so many people from different countries, and we still have some time for some questions or comments. Thank you all for participating and everyone who is connected. So that we can continue. We'll continue with a dialogue around archives and conflicts in Africa, facilitated by Christine Martinez, is the heritage conservator in Aude, and she's the head of the Department of Aude. She's been president of the French archivists, and she is the current president of ASF France and ASF International.
Bonjour, je vais m'exprimer en français. Est-ce que les 3 collègues
Good afternoon.
Burkina Faso et de
I'm going to speak in French. I'm asking my colleagues from Burkina Faso to connect.
Et les diversités de l'ensemble d'un continent aux cultures et aux sociétés extrêmement diversifiées. Il s'agira simplement d'un éclairage visant à susciter des questionnements et à mettre en lumière des enjeux qui ne sont pas toujours ou même sont rarement perçus au niveau international. On assiste en effet depuis une dizaine d'années dans un certain nombre de pays d'Afrique subsaharienne.
For a decade now, in several countries of Southern Sahara, we have witnessed the destruction of archives. And for example, in 2010, archives, administrative archives of the civil state archives were destroyed after the elections and the Assembly of Burkina Faso. Also in Senegal, demonstrations of students, not to mention the manuscripts of Timbuktu, which were spared from the destruction by militia, Islamic militia. What are the risks that threatening archives in Africa, and what challenges do we have for the preservation? In order to see this more clearly, we're going to listen to our 3 colleagues today talking about archives in Africa. We have Christian Cambou, from Burkina Faso. He's an archivist for more than 15 years with experience in the public and private services. She is in charge of the General Directorate and the Maison de la Santé. He is a part-time consultant and he manages documental information, and he also works for this association. He's the chairman of. Albert Samba is in charge of document management. He is also a teacher, and he is a member of the direction of archives. He's a mediator for archives and youth NGO, and he works as a secretary of this organization, and he has published work on archives and terrorism. Arsène Welko is archivist of WECA and a branch and president of ASF Congo, Republic of Congo. He has training on archival, and he works for the private sector as trainer. He has also worked on the records of the penitentiary records in the European Union. He's member of various associations in Congo. Their careers is a demonstration of their interest of archives, the importance of archives. We will start with a question. Can you explain the situation of archives in your countries, please, Christian? I think you're muted. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to exchange ideas. The situation in terms of archive management in this context of crisis, I think it's an alarming situation because we have a requirement for resources and mobilization at a time when we are seeing people disappearing, missing people in the population, and the governments have to make a lot of effort to protect the population, and they don't give sufficient resources, and they don't pay enough attention to the needs of archives. There are cases where the armed forces attack the populations. In these communities, they burnt all the archives of the council, city council. Was an alarming case. Also, the public administration saw how their offices were burnt, and I celebrate initiatives by the state, such as this organization created to do workshops thanks to the territorial affairs administration and all other stakeholders who have worked together to reflect on how we can safeguard all these archives. ASF was invited, and it was an opportunity to convey our availability to mobilize all the resources and volunteers to safeguard the archives. So we hope that a number of actions will be delivered by the territorial administration, and that our point of view is taken into account to safeguard the archives in this context. And I would like to give the floor to Freddy Bahima, who has done a relevant work in this respect, and she can share her impressions. Before giving the floor to Freddy, I would like to complement a little bit and explain what we wanted to demonstrate here. Albert Jambard, president of ASF Congo, can you explain the current situation of archives and
Thank you very much to all the participants then. Yes, I am Margaret Chapa. I am Vice President of Archivist and Without Borders in RDC. It is a great pleasure to express my opinion and to contribute with my message. And the message from RDC about the job that we do as archivists. So Africa represents diversity, ethnical and cultural diversity, and that very agitated. And from my country, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there is a war everywhere, and there are different movements and societies that fight, and they don't have the necessary prestige to work as archivists. So the situation has declined, and our work is to guarantee the preservation of these archives. Sometimes it is difficult to fulfill this mission, and so we don't have these archive services. They are managed by people in which politics are more important, and they don't want to make this field move on. So people see themselves in a situation in which they don't control the situation. This is a problem then, and the documents are not well preserved, so we don't know how to face this. And we are talking about these conflicts and the war, and in the end, we are talking about risks in my country, in which there are several conflicts, very relevant ones, and we don't have the mechanisms or situations to face this situation of crisis, and also the role that Archivists Without Borders do in the conception of this answer is precisely this idea of being aware of the value of archives in the society, and also we need to fight so that our country understands the importance, and also to allocate funds to preserve the archives. Also, we have projects about the protection of archivists, and we are fighting with associations so that we can preserve it, and also to have these different guidelines in order to act. And some things that we need to take into account and that we should preserve. And also, we have had a project in the European Union, and also the prison archives sometimes are lost, and it is difficult to control these documents, and it's difficult to mobilize it so that we can control all the reports. And it is difficult to give an answer to this need to control these prison documents. Also, we need some training centers to update and face the needs of public administration. Also, we need to create partnerships and with the different institutions and also to have all these aspects in our country. The problems are very big. And to conclude, we have to talk about these armed conflicts. And also, it is very complicated to end this problem. And sometimes these archives are destroyed, and in the end, we see that our documents are in danger because they don't understand the value of documents. And well, thank you very much. Thank you, Albert. And we can understand the different concerns of Christian and Albert, and you've probably shared them. And obviously, how did you see and this need to write a book? Can you present the main axis that you have been able to develop? Well, thank you very much. It is something that is very important to me. And nowadays in Burkina Faso, the archives are suffering a precarious situation. And the main goal is to focus our attention of authorities and also to talk to all our partners and colleagues to help us to preserve the archives. In 2022, the territorial administration in my city and the municipality, we all work for the preservation of archives, and the surgeries that were attacked by terrorists. So they not only destroyed the buildings, but they also took all the archives. So when these terrorist attacks finish, what we will have? And if we don't have these archives, so they destroyed the leftovers, and it is something that came to our mind in order to reflect and also to ask for the help and assistance. And archives in many occasions are not a priority. So in the end, they end up by being forgotten. This is our perspective. And then we have tried and changed the way we incorporate the archivist system in our country. There were a lot of attacks, and now there are a lot of attacks in everything related to state, public administration, and what public administration represent in the different aspects. So it's a very critical situation. So human lives are in danger. Also, the villages are destroyed and archives are not being taken care of. So in the end, archives are not in a good condition. So archives are abandoned, and we have tried to preserve them. And this is what really shocked me and brought me to think and talk to the authorities and all the archivists to reflect upon these problems. And the idea of just one person is not enough. We need more people to join us. And this is the idea I wanted to convey, because the rest of the professionals can help us. I believe that after what we do together, we will be able to move forward. And also the archives that are destroyed, and in order to quantify and measure the volumes that we do have and the archives that we have. But this allowed me to know, when I went to see these abandoned places, I could see which were the archives that remained there. And also in the different places, in schools, and apart from this, I also was able to know the efforts that are taken into account, because in Burkina Faso precisely, the elements and actors of the administration could also move and brought some archives. So this is a way to preserve it, and this is what we need. A lot of proposals that I write in my book, and also I realized that the destruction of archives has a terrible consequence, and the war is going to finish, and what's going to happen with the memory, with our history, the history of our archives, of our identity. And we say that the administration in the end is just a continuity, and we need to keep on working, and thanks to the archives, we will be able to have this continuity of the administration. So the role of the administration is in the archives, and killing these archives to me is like killing the administration that was working before the terrorist attacks. It's going to be very difficult to restore these archives and that have not been preserved. Like, for example, the archives that we have, and none of these archives are preserved in these structures. So these archives will not be able to be recovered again. And so also to see if these documents are there. So obviously, the population had to flee, leaving their personal archives. We have archives about property. It is a very big problem in our country. So this document says that this person is the owner, and then we have the municipalities, and the archives are lost. So we will have to start from zero. And then another aspect is that these populations these people lived in these houses, and these houses were burned, and then the houses were burned, so the documents inside the houses burned as well. And this is important to show the impact that this had in the population. So the solutions that I propose are to imply all the actors to reflect and to find new methodologies and in order to solve the situation. So I proposed a committee to protect the national archives. And some members of the public administration could finally work and make these archives being stored in these different places. How can we recover these archives? How can we protect them? And also the principle of territoriality is clear here. And in the end, the principles that have to be respected. And apart from the committee, we can talk about the electronic archives. And I talked about this and also to see how these digital archives can be centralized in order to protect them better. So it's not controlling the activities of the public administration, but to protect everything. So I've asked the people to preserve these archives and to share the threats that are present and also to preserve everything that they need. And we've seen the example of Mali, and they have worked to preserve everything, and also 80% of the manuscripts have been preserved up to now. And this is what we truly want, and this is what we need to elaborate. And I think we are going to achieve it. And there are some elements and things that we can use to keep on working and see how we can solve these conflicts, and also to convey everything that is needed and to protect as well this asset. Thank you very much for your attention. Oh, thank you very much. And through these three testimonials, we see that there is a paradox. First of all, the archives and the public power in the different communities and collectivities, different associations, and we see also that they are very important when talking about conflicts or terrorist attacks. So the consequence is that we see this paradox that needs to be solved, and we need to give them what they need, as you say, because they keep this idea. And we know that the public powers don't realize that we need to keep on working. And also it is important to protect the identity of people and the rights of the people. So it is difficult to recompose everything, and we have talked also this need to work in a very multidisciplinary way. And we have the role of archivists, and with the support of other forces. And these forces would be the army, the lifeguards. And have you seen these solutions, or and also I think it would be a great solution if we could apply it to our country. And because we have a problem in our country, and human beings and professional people and archivists and the role they need to take, the professionals that sometimes don't have the possibility to understand this. And we need to improve these characteristics, and also that can participate in these processes of preserving the archives, and this is going to have an impact on this preservation. We have to start working with the governments, because in some occasions they don't offer this opportunity. And as we said, together with the institutions managing, for example, the archives in our country. And on our hand, we have to do whatever we can so that we can understand our role, our mission, and how we can give an added value to our role. And also the international institutions and the Congo can give us the support to do this work, and in the preservation, especially in the preservation. And they will be able to help us and to obtain different solutions in the solutions of problems of archives and that are at risk. And also about terrorism, right now there are some regions in which access is not easy. Day after day, we needed to get ready and establish conversations with the European Union, and also day after day, the public administration is not present in the territory, so we don't give an added value and we don't understand the impact of documents. So it is a very important problem, and it requires a solution. So I truly believe that with AsF's we will find good solutions and solve this situation. And also, I can see that there is a problem in the Institute of Archivists, because the voices that are risen in order to have a better consciousness and awareness has to come from archivists. And there are many other voices apart from archivists. And I know a little bit the situation of archivists in the countries in Africa where I have worked and visited. It is not easy to be an archivist in Africa, and it is not easy to be heard. Are there any other voices that can be heard to give you support and accompany your actions? Well, up to now, we have the support of the European Union and accompanying us in different projects. And right now, I've been able to focus on other projects and start new projects to face all these different problems. And then I can see that archives are very important. And from this point on, we will be able to continue and give support with the new institutions in the national archives in Congo. And actually, it is actually the first person that is chosen is a political person, and this means that our role is to prove to them what's their perspective. And in the beginning, they had no vision regarding this, and they just started ruling the situation, and then we had to do whatever so that this person could have a vision. And in the end, we have created some reference terms. So because we want our vision to be included in the archives and also to underline which are the most relevant points when there are conflicts where human rights are menaced. So I think that with the support of the European Union and we will be able to use it and then to expand it in our partners and also to give support to UNESCO if necessary. And this is a award we can have all together, our strength and also the present situation in order to have an impact and to keep on working. Well, thank you very much. In Burkina Faso, the situation of archives is more taken into account from the central government. So which are the relationships of Archivists Without Borders with the institutions? In the state and local levels.
On a perdu Christian.
Allô, ça peut aller?
Yeah? Do you hear me?
Vous m'entendez?
Do you hear me?
Vous m'entendez?
Oui, on vous entend.
Voilà. Sinon, effectivement,
Okay.
en tout cas, ASF Burkina.
Yeah, we can hear you well in Burkina. We happen to get to know, and it is well appreciated by the institutions and this week actually we have the different archives in Burkina, and we've been able to validate this diagnosis and the functioning of these national archives. So we've been there, and the relationship has been very fruitful. And with the General Assembly that we have organized, and we have a lot of information, and the authorities have also appreciated this. ¿Ves a decir que no se oye? And we have be in touch with them. There are a lot of perspectives about collaboration with the central government and with the direction of different departments. And I said in the beginning that we have done the proposals and different workshops with the ministry that the ministry has organized a workshop about reflection and to take into account everything that has underlined. And I wanted to congratulate for these initiatives because this has allowed to raise awareness between all the different stakeholders and all the different authorities in order to preserve these archives in this context. And this workshop was organized by the ministry, as I said, and we have also got some inspiration during the General Assembly in order to continue the reflections. And you have mentioned in your remarks the presentations that the archives should contribute as well to the continuity of the administration. So I wanted to say that the authorities have to be sensitive and the public agents of the state, all the stakeholders have to be sensitive to all this. We think that raising awareness is something that must be included in our strategy of mobilization of all the stakeholders, the mobilization of resources. So I am really aware of this, and we have to think how we can organize different activities, these raising awareness activities in all the stakeholders so that everything is more precise, because they have to be well motivated. And this way, everything is going to be more fruitful. So I wanted to congratulate Albert because they have decided to create these awareness campaigns. And also we are fully convinced that we need to some support in the actions, and we need the support of international institutions. These institutions are further ahead in this raising awareness of the importance of the preservation of archives, for example, the European Union, as Albert mentioned, and to give the opportunity to collaborate with this institution. Because if the central government has to support these initiatives, putting money, well, they will say that they have no money. They say that it is not a priority, and we need to raise awareness so that it is a priority to them. So, as if we have this support, this awareness will allow the authorities to accept the situation and to give support to all the associations, all the stakeholders, all the archivists with money. And it has to be a priority before. And before that, we need the support from other international institutions. And they are aware of our situation. And the proposal that I did during this workshop to all the participants, and we have members who are volunteers, and there are archivists who are available and that can help the preservation, and they are volunteers. And we truly hope that there is a good collaboration between the different ministries and the different departments. Thank you very much.
Merci, Christian.
Thank you, Christian. We get to the end of the session. I wanted to thank you because you have answered to these different actions, and the most important thing is the mobilization, I would say, is one of the actions that I just mentioned. And apart from the reactivation of the different departments in Burkina Faso and Congo, there are other archivists that have to mobilize and who are mobilizing in order to make these call to action real. And in some sub-Saharan countries, it is really a must. And we have listened to you, and the project that you want to implement as well. So thank you very much to the three of you. And I don't know if someone wants to ask a question. This would be the moment to do it. Otherwise, we can ask questions through the chat option, the chat box. And the connection seems to work. So if you want to intervene, You can use the chat box. Thank you, Albert and Frakis. It's been very interesting, and we give you the support, and we accompany you. Thank you very much.
We continue with a number of experiences facilitated by Tesoro Osorio, Doctor Compared History of the Autonomous University of Barcelona. He's a member of the board of the ASF Colombia, and he has been advisor for the Commission of Human Rights. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today in these dialogues. We are congratulating you for your 25th anniversary. And of course, we celebrate the efforts of the scientific committee and all the organizations, when opening this dialogue around archives for the enforcement of human rights and reparation of victims. My name is Cesar Osorio. I'm a member of ASF Colombia, and we are grateful for the participation of 3 important institutions that generously have accepted an invitation to share the experience in this space. Today, we're going to talk about the risks that affect archives for enforcement of human rights. And based on the experience of civil society organizations, we're going to be defining some of the challenges and lessons learned by the civil organizations in this respect. It is worth mentioning 2 elements. The first one is that the international debate around the risks impacting archives in terms of human rights has taken the stage because the imposition of limits to access to the documental heritage are situations that are directly related with manipulation of history, and in this respect, with impunity as well. So this risks on our archives and the possibility that they might disappear or be manipulated has as a consequence an absence of social sanctions and institutional sanctions in front of these serious violations of human rights. And this is relevant because 25 years ago, ASF was born, but not only that, the international principles of combating impunity were published, and these are a reference for those societies that seek restoration of rule of law or peace. And one of the ideas of these international principles is that societies that aspire to overcome war and restore democracy, right to truth is essential, and that victims have the capacity to find out what happened, and something which is very important, to materialize our duty to remember. A right to truth is a fundamental right in these transition societies, and at the same time highlight the duty to remember, which is the obligation of states to set broad conditions so that archives related to serious violations of human rights are preserved so that new generations can access them and use them to enforce human rights. Likewise, these principles point out the importance of preferential access of victims and their representatives to these archives, that these commissions of truth have open conditions and have protection. There's another element, and that is that today, talking about archives and the risk implies approaching different dimensions. For example, the recognition that all policies need to take into account the risks and threats on the advocates of human rights, those who face political authority and try to follow the tracks of history, which are essential for this right to truth. We have 3 organizations with us to talk about this topic. We have the Guatemalan Mutual Support Group, also the Swiss Peace Organization, and the Association for SOS Archive Association, which have broad experience in the field, and the idea is to have a dialogue on 2 aspects: the main challenges they had to face as civil organizations working with archives under risk, and the main lessons learned for the tasks developed by the civil society organizations. First, we have Mario Polanco of the Mutual Support Group. It is an organization of families that give support in cases of abduction and serious violations of human rights in Guatemala between 1960 and 1996. Mario Polanco is with us. Mario, thank you for accepting our invitation. We also have with us Sahara Mar, who is official of the Dealing with the Past program of the Swiss Peace Swiss organization. She will share her experience around safe repositories. This is an international initiative, and we also have, in the name of SOS Archivi, we have Massimo Prociotti. He's the co-founder and president, and Michelle McKinney, the secretary of the organization. They will share some reflections on their experience and some ideas about archives under risk. Every institution has 15 minutes to share their experience, and if we have time later, we will have a dialogue about their explanations and questions and answers. So thank you for your participation, and Mario Polanco has the floor. Grupo de Apoyo Mutuo Guatemala, you have the floor. Welcome, Mario. Thank you, Cesar. It is a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for your explanation and your introduction. I would like to start my speech by explaining the conditions in Guatemala. We have had 4 decades of war, armed conflict in the country, and the repercussions of this terrible process was that Guatemala became the country with the highest number of violations of human rights in Latin America. During that period, I'm talking about that period because I want to make a difference that today, with all the drug trafficking, there are a lot of abuses and attacks to freedom, attacks against freedom. But back then, it was violence from the state. Once this process had finished and something happened, which I call a crisis of roles in the army and the security forces. They were used to impunity. They had a budget from the state, a limitless budget, and they could hire collaborators by cars, weapons, whatever. And they found themselves in a situation where we started a transition to democracy. And what they did was they moved to organized crime. We were able to detect a connection between organized crime and public servants. It was a criminal joint enterprise sanctioned by the criminal courts. And this is what is happening in Guatemala. And proof of this has been these events during the last decade, where after demonstrations against the former president, former member of the army, caused an increase or a worsening or an increase, of these organized crime groups. They joined forces, and today we have a state that is more and more authoritarian. And why is this happening? And all the social struggle is being judicialized. And when someone tries to say something, when someone tries to fight for justice, they are accused of money laundering or being a member of organized crimes, any type of crime. And after that, the process started, and if they are arrested, they are debunked, and there are a number of actions as a consequence that could lead the organizations they represent to complete ostracism. And here, databases and archives are under risk because these organizations are under attack and they have digital or physical information at any given moment during a legal process, taking advantage of regulations. They can be they can take all the documents and they might be lost or disappear. And here is where we work. The organization I represent has 40 years of existence, and briefly, I'm going to explain how we have created a big database. It is 130 meters, around 1.5 million pages. When the organization was created, we're hearing people that have their microphone open. We suffered a crisis of growth when we were created. After a few days of our creation, they knocked at our door, and families of victims came to our door to present their testimonies. It was like an emergency, and the members of the association wrote down the personal information of victims, information about the arrest, the date, the time. We focus on abductions, and out of this basic information, we have information of the culprits or eventual culprits. They gave details about the cars used in the abductions, maybe the number plate. All of this was recorded manually on paper, and later this was written with a typewriter. And this information included information on the person reporting the abduction with their telephone number. In the 80s, in Guatemala, having a landline was almost impossible. You have to wait in line for 10 years. So not everybody had a telephone number. And those files were complemented with legal actions carried out habeas corpus, interventions, international claims before the United Nations, and the file grew. In some cases, it grew a little. In other cases, they grew a lot. When the first files or archives of the state were opened, a lot of information was gathered. Some cases are huge, with a lot of pages. Some of them are small, just 3 or 4 pages, depending on whether it were evidence or not. The fact is that after taking care of this archive, keeping this archive, we were threatened because the state realized that we had all this information, and some of the actions that were taken against us, for example, the MP was started requesting information on these cases. Do you have the file of Mr. X or Y or Z? And then we found out that we have to structure this archive and protect it with processes such as digitalization, among others. And we realized we started to learn as we went, and we found out that we didn't have any historical files or records because they were not events of the past. This was living records where we have information of things that happened in our country in recent years. It's not an historical record because these documents are still open for historical memory, for academic studies, to judicialize cases. Our group is involved in many judicial cases, and we are using our own archives and files and records with information they contain. And we bring processes before the Ibero-American judicial commissions. And this is a document that just arrived. This is a ruling by the Ibero-American courts. This is a case of abduction, and this file will be filed with the victim records. So our archive continues to grow. But they have realized, these criminals have realized that we are a threat to them. This archive is a threat to them. So we had to face a number of situations. So we lost the connection. Some days we receive 7 requests for copies of our records. We don't have the resources to comply with these requests. It is complex for us to fulfill these requests. And eventually, they might come and take our records. Especially if this process is the legal proceedings opened against us. I have 10 open accusations against me that have been admitted because the public ministry is aligned with these criminals, especially with the families of people who committed violations of human rights. After this explanation, I would like to say that apart from this risk, I wanted to give you a number of proposals that could help so that our information is not taken or destroyed. And some of these ideas are the following. For us, it is important to have a space in these sort of events where we have an opportunity to explain to you and anyone who could watch this event later what the situation is in Guatemala. So this type of international solidarity is important for us. And it would be great if you came and visit our archive to convince your ambassadors to visit us. Another aspect that is important for us is to establish safe havens, which are safe places for documents. The problem is that we haven't digitalized all of our records because it is not easy to mass digitalize our records. We have to go file by file, trying to find a way to prevent any information leaks. So it would be great to have cameras and sensors in our offices to prevent break-ins. Some of these activities are our responsibility. We, for example, we are removing all documents that are close to windows to prevent any attack with firebombs or to protect these files and records physically from burglary. And it would be great to have agreements with universities, with other Latin American countries. So agreements for collaboration with universities so that we could have think tanks that are doing research on the information we have here. Information on violations of human rights include sensitive information, even about the presence of the United States in Guatemala. We suffered an invasion in 1954 in the United States by the United States. Mercenaries were used to end democratic process at the time, and this is in the files. So it is important to link and connect our archive with other national institutions in universities and centers around the world. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you very much, Mario, for sharing your experience and proposals. With the contribution of Mario, then we can have some interesting ideas. And like the persistence of violence and the lack of democracy that can generate risks into archives. And we can see it clearly when we talk about the risks in social organizations that this documentation of these violations of human rights and these archives that are sources of historical knowledge and also memorialization processes and then demands of justice. And then what could be done and the importance of networking and exchanging knowledge, the collaboration, the research, and also our colleague from Swiss Peace is going to talk about this, the looking for the safe repositories for the public archives and also for civil society archives and regarding human rights. So with this framework and this linking point that links with the project of Swiss Peace, we give the floor to Sahara Mar, and she is the coordinator of the program dealing with the past, working on this specific initiative of safe repositories, and also she has knowledge about conflicts in North Africa and Middle East and the risks for archives in this context with violence. Sahar, welcome and thank you very much for being here. You have the floor without further ado.
Thank you, Cesar, and good evening, everyone. Thanks, Cesar, for the introduction and also for providing us with the opportunity to speak in this panel. I'll be speaking in English so that if people want to switch also the interpretation. So as you said, Cesar, in my presentation, I will focus on the initiative that Swiss Peace coordinates, which is called the Safe Havens for Archives at Risk Initiative. So as you said, it's maybe I'm speaking like more from a solution perspective. So I will share my screen because I have a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, I hope you can all see it. Can you all see maybe the screen? Is it visible, Cesar? Is it visible, the screen, to everyone? Should I continue? Okay. Yes, thank you. So as I said, at Swiss Peace, we coordinate an initiative which is called the Safe Havens for Archives at Risk. Maybe also before explaining the initiative, it's worth mentioning that we are coordinating this initiative within an official mandate that we received from the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. The mandate is called Archives and Dealing with the Past, under which Swiss Peace is acting on behalf of the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. So I will start at the beginning, maybe with explaining the rationale and the motivation behind the creation of this initiative. So some of them are also risks, of course, to some of the motivations came as a result of the risks that that archives face. So for instance, in certain cases, we saw that some civil society organizations, for instance, who have archives, they hand over their archives to international organizations or bigger organizations. And in some cases, the civil society organizations, they couldn't get back their archives. So this is also questions maybe or challenges related to access. and local ownership of the archives. Also in Switzerland, we have the maybe experience of Switzerland hosting a security copy of archives at risk. So we have, for instance, 3 instances. The first one is the Historical Archives of the National Police of Guatemala, where the Swiss government has a security digital copy of these archives. We have also recently the archives of the Colombian Truth Commission. So Switzerland and Colombia has recently, I think during the summer, they signed an agreement so that Switzerland keeps a security copy of the archives of the Truth Commission. And we have also the experience of the records of the Marshall Islands Nuclear Claims Tribunal, also where a copy of those archives are also based in Switzerland. So this is some of the challenges and the cases. There are also other risks. Mario has explained some of them. So as we all know, for instance, the archives could be at risk in context of armed conflicts, of war or invasion, especially if we are speaking about, for instance, archives that document human rights violation or specific past incidences. Also, we are speaking, sometimes archives could be at risk in cases of repressive regimes or dictatorships. For some cases also maybe are related to climate change or natural disasters. If we speak about fires, floods, earthquakes, archives of CSOs or archives which are held maybe in offices could be at risk because of these natural circumstances. Sometimes there are risks related to the capacity maybe of the actor who is in possession of these archives. So sometimes we speak about lack of resources. This could be financial resources in order to preserve the archives in good and proper conditions. And sometimes also we spoke about like maybe mold, the dust, insects, so like the atmosphere of the preservation in general. In light of these risks and cases, the initiative has been created with 3 main objectives. So the first objective of the initiative is to facilitate contact between institutions who are in possession of archives and records at risk, and also facilitating the contact between them and between potential hosting institutions that can be suitable. And here I will explain which body at the initiative does this facilitation. And here we are speaking about suitable hosting institutions because in certain cases, the holding institution has certain conditions because, for instance, some hosting institutions, they say, if you keep a security copy with us, you won't be able to access these copies, for instance, for 3, 4, 10 years. So there are conditions sometimes that are required by the hosting institution. So there is a whole process of looking for the criteria that fits into the desire of the hosting institution, of the sending institution. Another initiative also of the Safe Havens for Archives at Risk is to provide guidance and specific advice concerning safe haven solutions and safe havens processes. And here also I will explain later what documents have been developed to provide advice and guidance for these cases. And then also to contribute on questions related to safe havens for archives at risk at the policy level. So also we try to be visible in events and conferences like this venue in order to disseminate first this link between the archives at risk and the need for looking for a safe haven, and also to disseminate the initiative. So now I will go directly to the website of the initiative, and I will put in the chat afterwards the link to the website. So if I do stop share, and then I think you can all see the website now. Yeah. So the website is available in Arabic, English, French, Spanish, Russian. So we wanted to make it accessible by actors from different contexts. And in the website, you can find, like here, about the initiative, like a historical background or context of how the initiative was established. I will jump directly to the, as I mentioned, to the body that does the facilitation and the coordination and also the provision of advice. So we have a body called the Advisory Committee. So as I said, Swiss Peace is the coordinator, is the secretariat of the initiative. But we created a committee called an advisory committee, which brings together actors or representatives of organizations from different perspectives. So we have in the advisory committee some representatives of international institutions, such as the International Council on Archives and the International Committee of the Red Cross. So these are institutions who have an expertise and a robust knowledge on the topic of archives at risk. We have also representatives of governmental institutions, mainly national archives. So we have a representative of the National Archives of Finland, National Records of Scotland, Swiss Federal Archives, and Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. So these are institutions that can be potential safe haven or a potential hosting institution. So here we have also the perspective of hosting institution being reflected in this advisory committee. We have also other non-governmental institutions, such as the International Institute for Social History, which is also a potential hosting institution. We have Oman for Documentation and Research, is a CSO based in Lebanon, so it reflects actually the other perspective, so the perspective of a CSO who has archives at risk. And we have other universities also, as Mario mentioned, some universities, sometimes they act as repositories. So we have a representative from the University of Reading, the University of Texas, and then we have also individual experts who have been accompanying different cases of archives at risk. So with this perspective, different perspectives being reflected in this advisory committee, we try to we try to facilitate the contact between. We receive requests. I will speak a little bit afterwards about some cases. We receive requests from actors who are in possession of archives at risk, and we try to find a potential hosting institution either within the advisory committee. So in some certain cases, for instance, representatives of these non-governmental or governmental institutions, they can say, it's a good, this is a good case, it fits within our collection and our conditions, so we can host it. And sometimes we find hosting institution or a safe haven solution beyond the advisory committee, but we try to facilitate the contact. So this is with regards to the advisory committee. As I said, also one of the objectives is to provide guidance and advice. So for this also we have developed 3 resources. The first one is the guiding principles for archives at risk. So it's a set of principles that tries to give guidance with regards to the cases of archives at risk. Again, the principles are also available in different languages, English, Spanish, French, Arabic, Russian, Ukrainian. And just to give you like an example of what kind of principles they are included. So we have, for instance, principle of last resort, transparency, ethics, ownership principle, succession principle, control of materials. So it's a different set of principles. So this is the first document that we hope to be that gives guidance to certain cases, and also maybe just as a note as well that these guiding principles have been endorsed by let me see, have been endorsed, I think, by ICA and I think by the Latin American Association. I don't recall the full, yes, by the International Council on Archives and also by the Latin American Association of Archivists. And we have also 2 other documents. So the second one is a commentary on the guiding principles. So it provides like concrete cases and examples. And the other document or resource is a model agreement, again available in different languages. And the model agreement is a general agreement or a draft of agreement between a hosting and sending institutions that could provide an example when there is like a transfer of copies, either physical or digital copies between hosting and sending institutions. So this is I will put the link to this website later, and you can also find, for instance, resources, so articles written by members of the advisory committee, or also recordings of some events that we have done. And maybe also just as before I will come back to the presentation, maybe also just as a note that we at the advisory at the initiative, we don't provide financial contribution or funding, but we try to more like do the facilitation role, and we try to accompany processes. So regarding the cases, I cannot speak, unfortunately, about the details of the cases because we receive requests on a confidential basis, but I can give like a general overview. So for instance, we received cases and requests from countries from war zones such as Syria, from countries where there is a political instability in the Horn of Africa, Southeast Asia, Afghanistan, in countries, some Latin American countries that, how to say, where there is a current or a previous repressive regimes. So these are the contexts from where we received cases. The type of records or the type of records that were in possession of these cases. For instance, some of them, they are digitized security copy of archives, so CSOs looking for a safe haven for the digitized copies. Some CSOs also, they have films, videos, testimonies of victims or pictures, and they are looking for also, or sometimes even journals, and they are looking for safe haven for these records. Regarding the actors, we received some requests from CSOs, either based on the ground or in the diaspora. One case also was from an individual human rights defender. And also other requests regarding, not regarding to the safe haven, but regarding to, how to say, like a guidance. So some organizations that they reach out to us because they have questions or they wanted advice regarding a safe haven solution, or also some organizations they reach out also in order to, so that we can help them in finding a suitable safe haven solution because they have specific cases, conditions. Because as I said at the beginning, sometimes the hosting institutions, they have conditions which doesn't always, which couldn't always be acceptable by the sending institution. And the type of support that we provided, for some cases, we tried to look for a safe haven for the digital security copy. For some organizations, we accompanied them in the process of looking for funding to digitize a part of their archives. So we try to find, since we don't provide financial funding, then we try to look with the CSO for funding solutions. Some solutions, as I said, the hosting institution was a member of the advisory committee. So there was a case where a member from the advisory committee, he said that his institution can be a hosting institution. So they volunteered to, or they accepted to host a security copy and to cover the process of hosting the digitized archives. And for some organizations, actually, we found solutions at the university libraries. So some of the cases, we found solution at the library of the University of Basel. These are specific cases. Sorry that I couldn't provide like lots of details because we receive all the cases on a confidential basis. And maybe just as a note, when we receive the case, we have a document. How to say? It's like a survey or a questionnaire that we send to the hosting institution, to the sending institution, and it has questions about, for instance, what types of risk, if it's related to for us to assess also the situation, how many terabytes, for instance, what does the archives contain, because all these details help us to identify a suitable hosting institution. So with this, I have finished the presentation. You can see here the my email and the email also of the initiative, and I will copy paste in the chat the link for the Safe Haven, the website of the Safe Havens Initiative. So with this, I have finished, and thank you very much, Cesar and everyone for listening.
Muchas gracias por tu presentación.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We see that the analysis about the risks for archives is very complex, and a significant aspect is the function of the networking and how the experience shows the importance to join different forces in looking for these safe repositories, these safe havens, universities, national stakeholders, social associations, and some public institutions that can be these spaces to safeguard these testimonials and documents in societies that are in a situation of war and for different types of violence. And another aspect that we should mention in the presentations is the diversity of risks in the archives. Some risks are social or political, and other risks are more related to the environment. But we see that this is a challenge, and thinking about policies surrounding risks means to make like a catalog of these different risks. And also a third element that we could mention is the importance of the exchange of experiences regarding best practices and treatment of these archives and violations of human rights. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sahar, for the presentation. And to finish this conversation, we have our colleagues from the association SOS Archivi. It is an institution and which has a specific goals, the generation of a culture around the prevention and preservation of archives, and also to promote alliances between different actors of the private sector, the public sector, civil society, and this process that will allow to assess the different risks. And we have Massimo Cruciotti, who is the co-founder and president of this institution, and Michel Magini. They are going to give us this presentation. I wanted to thank them for their contribution, and without further ado, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Buenas tardes, señoras y señores. I'm Massimo Cruciotti, founder and president of the non-profit association SOS Archivi, an association that has been working in Italy for over 15 years in collaboration with public and private entities, professionals and companies specialized in risk prevention and emergency management. We have offered our help in the now frequent and repeated emergencies that have struck the fragile Italian territory, so rich in heritage, to be defended because it's very important for us to pass on to future generations, to the young people of today, the precious sources of the past that are preserved in archives and libraries precisely. I want to thank you for today's invitation, Archiveros Sin Fronteras, and I'm very pleased today to be here with you to present SOS Archivi with the Secretary of the Association, Michele Magini. I will give the introductory part of the presentation, and my colleague will then go into detail about our activities for the protection of archives and libraries in Italy. Okay, now I go to share my presentation. A moment. Do you see the? No. Così. Right? Do you see the screen?
Sí.
Yes, Massimo.
La vemos.
Okay. So straight on to about us. Who we are. We are, as I said, an association that brings together professionals from the archive sector, and we work on promoting the culture of prevention and emergency management. SOS Archivi objective is to become the main point of reference for the public and the private sectors. And we work for the protection of the national and international archival heritage. Through its networking activity, SOS Archivi can also offer immediate intervention in emergency situation with a range of selected and trusted specialists that we will see later. Something about our public, SOS Archivi has a selected audience in the world of cultural heritage. We have a unique dialogue that has been lasting for 15 years, and we occupies a reference space at national and international level with relations and with protocols of understanding with the main stakeholder of public and private environments in the world of cultural heritage. We have a network of supporting members, are diverse companies that offer products and services in the cultural heritage sector, insurance company, services company, logistics company, a very different area. And about the activities, I think it's better I leave the floor to Michele, because he is the secretary and he knows better than me what we do.
Okay, Massimo. Thank you. In the meantime that you stop sharing your screen, I say hello, everybody. I thank once again Archiveros Sin Fronteras to give us a space in which we can promote and tell what we do also in our activities. So with no further delay, I'm going to share the screen. Okay. Okay, this is it. Can you see the presentation? Okay, is it moving? Great. So, as Massimo said, since 2009, we are working to spread the culture of prevention and the preparedness culture in order to address and face in the best way possible the emergency that big and small emergency that can occur when we have to deal with archivals, and also I would add heritage in general. What we do in practice, we do training. So we organize workshops in which we teach people how to deal with the emergency, also helped, of course, by a specialist using the huge network we have with specialists, archivists, civil forces, restorers, and so on. But we do not do just the physical training. We also started to create webinar and digital talks focused on the emergency, but not just the emergency. Also, we address topics, archival topics related. So we started during a big emergency, during the COVID. We talked, okay, what we can do in order to continue our mission to face this emergency within the emergency. And so during the COVID, we started with some webinars, some talks, we call it digital talks, to continue talking about archives and emergency. But SOS Archivi, it's not just the emergency. When we manage to collect funds, we also work in heritage and archival enhancement projects. So just to say, the last project we were involved in, we collect funds and we organize also an exhibition on a photographical archive that need to be restored. It was a very, very interesting project because we managed to restore Antonio Beato photographies, a famous photographers that started to do photos of the Egypt during the first Grand Tours. So it was very, very interesting, also addressing enhancement project about cultural and archival heritage. And last but not least, we do also dissemination, as already Massimo said, and networking. How we do it? We do it, as said before, with specialized training. So we do events, do inside exhibitions, webinar, and so on. As said before, we do emergency training. Our workshop are free, are open to everybody, because our main aim, as said before, is spreading the culture of prevention and give the basic notion in order to face the emergency. Because preparedness, in our opinion, is the first response in order to avoid things, let me say, getting worse during emergencies. Online activities. As I said before, we as association work a lot on our digital channels. So I will provide the link after my speech in the main chat. We have a specific section in the website, but also in our YouTube channel, in order to keep track and record of all the online events we have done so far. As said before, we started during the COVID, but this was just the beginning, and we, as association, we managed to be also part of the local committee for ICA Rome, the International Council on Archive Rome edition. So we, together with ICA, we started a sort of events before the Rome Live event, and we addressed a lot of topics, and everything is available on our website and our YouTube channel. Not just about the emergency, but also for archive-related topics in general. I'm just scrolling very fast the slides in order to give you an idea of the numbers and the followers that are still increasing. And as said before, this is a focus on the ICA event in which we were.
Michele, fai scorrere, però non si vede, fissa su.
Forse. Ok.
Ok.
Sorry. As said before, the ICA, we were part of the local committee for the ICA Rome 2022 edition. And we organize a production of open and free streaming events that are available on our website for everybody to see and comment. Last but not least, we were part and stakeholder of European project in the developing of web applications that address risk in the cultural heritage sector. So we took part in the study of web applications that are also available and free to use and to evaluate also for you. I will insert the link in the chat as I finished my talk. So basically, the application are meant for both professional and non-professional in the, let's say, cultural heritage sector. One of the projects also has in the main objectives to also teach and give, basics notion on how to address and to manage risk. The app itself is a sort of training application that starts giving notion and then give the opportunity to the trainee to test his notion on the field. So basically, this is it. I won't take any more time. I will send the link in the chat. If you have any question, I'm here at your disposal. Thank you again, Arquiveros Sin Fronteras.
And from my side, thanks again for your attention. If you are interested, you can follow the link in the chat. I invite you to follow our network on the website svsarchivi.it and through our social channels, of course. Thank you very much for your attention.
A Massimo Cruciotti y a Michel Maghini, muchísimas gracias por
Miguel
su
Maghini,
presentación.
thank you very much for your presentation. In this experience, we can see a focus around promoting a culture of prevention and protection of the cultural heritage and historical heritage. I think it's worth pointing out that around these three speeches we heard, we find some requirements or some lines of work that might be relevant when thinking about alternative pathways to deal with archives at risk. Training is fundamental. Increasing our horizons and the spreading of knowledge around archives and the historical cultural relevance thereof is something we've seen, and also in order to enforce human rights. And this training can incorporate technical elements, knowledge transfer, best practice exchange to generate optimal conditions to safeguard the documentary and testimonials heritage. This is a line of work we can draw from these three interventions. And also, when faced with the context of risk around archives, it is important to have professional networks, experts that can have the ability to give advice around how to act in emergency situations. Third line of work, which I think is relevant, is this networking, this fabric of alliance, something I've seen in your interventions, how we can create bonds between institutions and organizations that, in spite of their diversity, can find common ground in the idea of generating the best conditions to safeguard, grant access, and give public knowledge of archives as a testimony of history, and in some cases, long history that talks about national identities, collective identities, and community identities, and also trace or testimony of the reality of violence that impact some societies that demand peace and the reestablishment of the rule of law. And a fourth line of work, which is very relevant in this forum, is the opening of a debate, a public debate around historical and cultural heritage and archives. And this reminds me of the call of the special relatorship of the UN about the importance of creating communities of thought and communities of practice where we can have a dialogue on human rights and sharing the knowledge about memory and the archival knowledge. With the experience we have seen in this panel, we can feel that we can achieve common grounds, find common grounds between among the different approaches to archives at risk. So let's continue our debate on this crucial subject, which is archives at risk. All the organizations that take part in the chat have given their contact details, and it would be great if we could continue to promote this dialogue and materialize this wish to exchange knowledge and best practices and experiences around the safeguard of the documentary and testimonial heritage. To all of you, all the speakers, we'd like to thank you for your interventions, and we continue with the program and the agenda on the value of archives in the restoration of victims. So thank you so much for your participation and your attention in this dialogue. All the organizations, Swiss Peace, the Mutual Support Group, and SOS Archivi. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And I'll give the floor back to Adrian to continue with the program. To finish these 10th days around the value of archives in the reparation of victims, we have some conclusions by Víctor Manuel Márquez de Fonseca and some closing words by Marta Carreras, President of AsF Spain. Mr. Fonseca is a professor of history, director of the journalism department of the University of Fluminense. He's worked at the University of Rio de Janeiro. He's a member of the group of experts of archival description. Thank you. I would like to start by thanking you for the invitation. It's really important that we commemorate our 25th anniversary at the time when the section of human rights 20 years ago was created, and the Declaration of Human Rights and the CIA was created 75 years ago. It is a pleasure to be a member of the Executive Bureau and to have two members connected to Archivists Without Borders. And I believe that this can help us to continue to work together in favor of archives and human rights. Archives and human rights are closely related, and this is something which is obvious for all. Archives are fundamental for the defense of human rights, as well as to demonstrate violations. There's a text by Truth Peterson, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Is a Carver commentary where he briefly examines, briefly examines the 30 articles of the Universal Declaration, and she proves how each one of them is connected to archive records. So this is indisputable. And we can also say that right to archival and right to access to archives is a human right. Archives can be used to prove, know, and identify. Without archives, we cannot be human beings because we cannot produce culture, because we cannot leverage the knowledge produced by others and identify ourselves as members of human society and prove the things we want to prove. So taking care of archives, protect them, make them accessible to all is something, is also means also fighting for human rights. There are times when, due to political reasons or natural disasters, archives are at risk and require immediate action. And it is beautiful to see community organizing quickly to face these situations. Sometimes we have to report, sometimes we have to do legal proceedings to support the archives, and sometimes we have to help to safeguard, organize, and give access to archives. Congratulations for your anniversary. I wish you a long life supporting archives and above all human beings. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, let's move on to the conclusions. Some of these conclusions we have reached after 2 days, 2 very intense sessions. Conclusion is that we need to continue working and mobilize to go against the official message, the example of Archivists Without Borders, Reconnect projects, and the work carried out by the various sections, and also the work of SWISPEACE, the GAM, and the Mutual Support Group and SOS, Akibi. They are examples, clear examples that we need to continue working. We need to continue working so that the testimonies can be used before the courts, guaranteeing its authenticity without no shadow of a doubt. Technology can help us, and the way we need to work to set the guidelines that leave no doubt when using data, when using archives that are sensitive. And we've seen the experiences of different companies which require common ground, such as transparency and regulation, so that the defense of human rights can be preserved, as the threats in many countries make finding a solution very complex. Raising awareness and the importance of these archives is also important. Safeguarding archives has an important consequence, because what happens with memory, this has a direct impact on the people who have suffered terrorist attacks, and also in conflicts such as the one in Guatemala and other countries. These risks and their disappearance of records can promote a negationist version that prevent the enforcement of justice and reparation, and public institutions can use law to take away records that could help the victims, and we need to take this into account because it's very serious that this continues to happen. During these 2 days, we talked about the background of the collaborative work and solidarity. All this work done with commitment, with solidarity, because it cannot be otherwise. Finally, I would like to thank all the speakers for their participation. Thank you for inviting us to reflection, giving us food for thought, and thank you for promoting our will to continue doing our job. The High School of Document Management is covering the studies of archives and human rights in March, and the members of the sections of SAF International have a discount. So it's a good time to become members of SAF, regardless of your section. So this is the end. Thank you for attending this event, and see you next time.